Hello, and thanks for joining us today for this webinar titled Successfully Navigating Cell and Gene Therapy Supply Chains in the Post-Pandemic World, brought to you by Informa Pharma Intelligence and sponsored by BioCare. My name is William Masters, writer at Informa Pharma Intelligence, and I'll be your host today. But before we jump into the presentation, let's just go over some housekeeping items. Firstly, if at any time you are having technical difficulties, please just click on the Test Your Connection button, and this will take you through to a connection checker and FAQs page. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, there is a chat now function in order to go through to the support team who can assist you. If you'd like to enlarge the presentation, just click the maximize icon or drag the lower right-hand corner of the presentation window to enlarge. Today's webinar will contain a couple of poll questions that will pop up on your screen during the presentation for you to answer. There will also be a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so if you have any questions, we would like to hear from you. To ask something of our presenters, simply type your question into the question window on the bottom of your screen and then hit submit. We'll be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A, and if there's extras, we'll try to get back to you after the webcast via email. If you'd like to listen to this webinar again, today's session is being recorded and will be available to view on demand in about 48 hours. I'll now introduce our speakers. So first, we have Christopher Good, Director of Cell and Gene Therapy Logistics at BioCare. Based in Cambridge in the UK, Chris has global responsibility for cell and gene therapy logistics at BioCare. Since joining BioCare in 2002, Chris has worked in a variety of roles, demonstrating BioCare's unique, client-centric approach, leading teams to deliver in a wide range of challenging situations, to include the complex supply chain needs of commercial distribution for FDA-approved therapies. And then we have Vu Lam, Supply Chain Analyst at Repertoire Immune Medicines. Vu Lam is a supply chain analyst with Repertoire Immune Medicines with 6 years of logistics and supply chain experience. Vu helps to find modern solutions to today's modern supply chain problems. And with that, I'll hand things over. So Christopher, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, William, and welcome everybody. So my name is Christopher Good, and really just want to talk a little bit about the impact of the past year. So the past year has demonstrated the importance of accessible healthcare and the modern world's reliance on the scientific and in particularly the biotech sectors, with the amazing responses seen in the rapid development of new vaccines, treatments and monitoring of variants. The sector is reportedly poised for further accelerated growth and development this decade. The logistics sector too has demonstrated its importance, whether that's through delivery of products direct to consumers' homes or supporting supply chains of food and medicines across the globe. BioCare is proud to have supported the efforts of scientists and medical professionals throughout the past year, from early transport of PPE and medical equipment through ongoing coordination and transport of R&D, clinical trial and genetic monitoring samples to more recent vaccine distributions. In this webinar, I want to explore some of the issues faced in maintaining the supply chain for complex cell and gene therapies, the anticipated continuing impact of the pandemic on the movement of these critical products, and strategies that have proven successful during the ongoing period of change. But first, a quick slide to introduce BioCare, and obviously you'll be glad to hear it's only a single short slide. So really, I guess to introduce BioCare, the first thing that's important to say is that we provide logistics services dedicated to the biotech, pharmaceutical and life sciences sector. We do not provide logistics services to any other sector at all, so we are 100% dedicated to this sector and always have been. We've been doing that now for over 35 years and more recently have become part of the DPD group, the multinational DPD group. Our headquarters are based in Cambridge, United Kingdom, but we have a global reach with multiple locations, BioCare locations right across the world. If you notice from our logo in the top corner, it's moving science forward, and that has been our strap line for well, certainly as long as I've been with the company, and I think it's really as true today as it is then. We really exist to help scientists, to help medical professionals move science forwards, and we do that by supporting them to in their core tasks, and supporting them through excellence in logistics services to allow them to focus on their core tasks. We are a customer-driven organisation, and we do not operate call centres. So when you need to contact a BioCare location, you'll get right through to the relevant operational people. Even with all of the disruptions last year, we received a 95% overall rating as voted for our customers, which I think is testament to the hard work of all of the customer-facing teams. We provide a white glove service and have always done. 3/4 of our shipments are actually temperature critical. We help with all aspects of the shipping process. That includes provision and assistance with customs paperwork, packaging design and actual provision of packing, but also the physical packaging of the products as well. So with regards to cell and gene therapy logistics services, they are managed by our dedicated team and built around a core central service. That service, however, is customized to the specific client, the specific product. That really allows us to make sure that any particular product sensitivities or particular impacts on the patient or medical professionals or even the manufacturer are adhered to, and really provide that truly customized service to our clients. Now, this has paved the way for handling many thousands of cell and gene therapy shipments, where this approach has become essential to the design, implementation and management of the successful supply chain. So cell and gene related shipments currently make up approximately 10% of our total volume, and that covers all stages of development, from preclinical through clinical stages right through to the movement of FDA approved commercial products as well. We are continuously investing to make sure that we meet and exceed the high demands of this rapidly developing sector. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So this really is an overview slide just to demonstrate the complex nature of cell and gene therapy supply chains. It's quite a simplistic slide and maybe something that you've seen before, but I think it's important to go through this at this point. So it starts often with raw materials. These may be typically vectors, possibly GMP material, shipped, frozen, very time and temperature sensitive, often internationally sourced, so there may be customs or duty or tax implications, and also possible export restrictions as well. Apheresis collection and transport, typically we ship as fresh or frozen. Now, these are extremely time sensitive and obviously temperature sensitive as well, and very careful controls need to be made of the movement of these products to make sure they reach the manufacturing site in good condition. Once the product has been manufactured, then we would ship that back to the infusion center. Typically, these would be shipped at cryogenic temperatures, and again, very temperature, time sensitive as well, and with real-time visibility required. So because the logistics actually becomes part of the manufacturing process with the collection and transport of apheresis material and then return of the drug products, it really is important that the lengths and the levels that we go to make sure that that product reaches its destination in good condition and good time are maintained. Finally, there would be monitoring samples out of the manufacturing site, which would typically also be shipped at cryogenic temperature. Now, these would also be time and temperature sensitive, but probably less time sensitive than the previous parts of the shipping chain. So I'd like to hand over to Vu at Repertoire.
Hi everyone, my name is Vu. I am a supply chain analyst at Repertoire. So we're a company based in Cambridge, and then so we do a lot of work with BioCare in terms of our products logistically and in supply chain. So I'm going to move to the next slide to just give an overview of my company. So who are we? So Repertoire is a fully integrated discovery therapeutic company. We have a few locations, mainly in Cambridge, Mass, and then in Switzerland. We are again around 120 people. We are in a clinical stage trials. So basically, we use your T cells to create this diverse response to cancer treatments. And so, if you'd like to learn more about our company or my company, please feel free to look us up at repertoire.com. And then, so the next part we talk about, again, this webinar talks about difficulties in supply chain during the pandemic, and we'll go through a few of those supply chain challenges that we had. So again, with the whole pandemic and with all the restrictions we had, some of the things that we do have difficulties is patients, right? In terms of their biology, whether they want to come in because of COVID or many other things. They're patients and they're human, so there are a lot of difficulties sometimes having patients come in. There are a lot of, like with COVID, there are a lot of logistical restrictions in terms of flights, the way that we transport our products, and because of COVID, a lot of flights are not available. So just working through that. As Chris mentioned earlier, a lot of our products, the apheresis or even are time sensitive and temperature sensitive. So just trying to maintain the product at the best viability to so that it is able to get to our site properly. Delays in raw material, I'm sure anyone who's in the industry has experienced that in terms of some of the materials can become delayed. I mean, as obvious, kind of simple demonstration or example is the toilet paper issue, right? Like a lot of simple things are delayed because of COVID and other reasons. Again, COVID is one of the biggest reasons a lot of us on this call is how we navigate the future going forward. And Operation Warp Speed has also affected some of the supply chain issues, as most of the supply chain medical or even biological material is going to projects that are pertain to COVID to increase the vaccine. So we do see a few challenges. And again, we work with BioCare directly, and they've been really helpful and very knowledgeable. And so just to go on the next slide, what we've done as a team, BioCare has helped us be really flexible in the time that, in COVID, there's a lot of unknowns because of a lot of things that occur. And BioCare, being BioCare, they're very good about being flexible. As Chris said, there is no call center. And whenever I need something from BioCare, I'll call BioCare, and there's always someone there to respond to my questions, whether via email or getting on a call. They're very knowledgeable about the cell therapy industry, and they've helped us navigate some of the more difficult routes that we have. And so having them as a partnership has been really beneficial for us. And Chris said 95% of their shipments have made it on time, and I would have to agree with that statement. A lot of our shipments have been on time or early, and we really appreciate all the work that BioCare has done for us, and in terms of being a partner with us. So yeah, that's more or less about me. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
Okay, thank you, V. That's great to hear. Okay, so now we have a poll question. Really, I thought it would be interesting to find out from the audience, try and get a feel from people as to which area actually have you been most disrupted in during the pandemic. So is that patient recruitment or access? Is it center disruption? So it could be apheresis center, clinical center, or even manufacturing center. Material supply shortages or competing supply chains. So is there limited supplies of vectors, for instance, or allogeneic starting materials, or even hardware, even vials and bags and so on. And then finally, obviously most importantly to us, logistics, transport and or border disruption. So are you having shipments delayed? Are you having status updates, or trouble getting status updates, or even difficulty organizing and contacting partners as well? So just to recap, so disruption in which area has impacted you most during the pandemic? So is it patient recruitment or patient access, center disruptions, material supply shortages or competing supply chains, or logistics, transport and border disruption? So I think it will take a few more seconds for that to go through. So just to recap on the previous slide that I presented with regards to the overview of the supply chain, really the key message there is the complexity of the supply chain, and really the important thing about that as well, particularly with cell and gene therapies, is that it's not just a complex supply chain as a sort of overview. It's actually a complex supply chain on an individual patient level, and obviously that certainly increases the challenges when maintaining the tight time and temperature sensitive nature of these products, particularly during such times as pandemics as we've seen. Okay, so we're just getting some results through. So the percentages that we have, it's approximately just under 7% for patient recruitment, and also center disruption. Material supply shortages has been the biggest one, with just over 50%, and then logistics, transport and border disruption in a third, just over 33%. So that's quite interesting. I think that clearly the bottom two there are really causing people more disruption. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So really, this slide is to just highlight again what when we're designing a solution for cell and gene therapy, what we're looking at to try and achieve. This has been quite well covered by the industry, but I think it's important to run through these key areas again, really just to give that overview. With cell and gene therapies, you've got lots of physical locations, all interconnected essentially through specialist logistics providers, and each movement is critical to the success of that product, of that therapy. So firstly, with time, so really this is all around the viability of the cells, making sure they get to the manufacturing facility or patient in good condition. Any delays in transport can have a big impact on the validity of the cells, on the actual end product itself. So it's vital that shipments are delivered on time and on schedule. When delivering to manufacturing sites, it's important that deliveries are made within schedule. It may be that the manufacturing site is particularly busy, and if you miss that manufacturing schedule, then it has a knock-on effect. So it's vitally important that they're delivered on time. Now, this time-sensitive nature also actually includes timely provision of any preconditioned packaging. There's no point the driver turning up ready to collect an apheresis sample, for instance, there's no point the patient turning up to be apheresised if there isn't any packaging ready to transport their material. So, this is actually not just the live product movement. It's actually important to also have the same levels of control, the same levels of oversight with the actual provision of packaging. Now, also as well, when we're talking about apheresis samples, the timing may be quite changeable on the day. Patients may be delayed. The process may take longer, and it's quite common for us to have delays on the day, delays in collection time, and it's really important to build in that flexibility, to have that flexibility to be able to react to delays in real time. And that then may have knock-on effects, as we'll talk about a bit later. So temperature. Obviously, these products are extremely temperature sensitive, and the product must be not only maintained at the correct temperature throughout, but it's important that temperature is recorded, so there is that proof, that record that it has been kept at the right temperature throughout. And to do that, a specialist would use particular packaging types, so be that refrigerated or controlled ambient packaging, or cryogenic or deep frozen packaging. That packaging, before it can be provided, it's important that it's going to perform to the best of its ability to perform 100% every time. And to do that, there's lots of controls that the specialist would put in place around how that package is set up, how it's preconditioned, how it is requalified between use, and so on. Now, also as well, with regards to temperature sensitivity, is also how that product is going to be used in the end clinical environment. How can the clinician, how can the clinic actually handle that product in that packaging? How can they remove it in good condition? How can they remove it to make sure it's not damaged? And all of this needs to be factored in when looking at the supply chain designs. Now, obviously, to complete all of these tasks, you need highly trained operatives. Now, the complex nature of all of these tasks means that expert oversight and operation is required at every single stage. So this is from initial call, design of the solution, through to the physical preparation of the packaging, through to the actual collection, and then monitoring and oversight and any remedial action that's taken place throughout. It's absolutely vital that there is highly trained operatives completing this. Now, although systems obviously play a big part of what we do, systems ultimately help people to do their tasks. So it really is important that we don't forget about the people in this part of the process. Now, global coverage is obviously important as well. Many vectors, for instance, as we've said, are sourced outside of the country of manufacture or where they're required. Often we may be shipping cells right around the world, and it's really important for the solutions that are put in place to be global. Interlinking products, locations, and people through logistics, essentially. So risk mitigation is really probably another one really important area here. So with logistics, as I'm sure everyone is aware, there's a lot that can happen. It's generally a case of when and not if there's a problem. So risk mitigation means that you need to have backup options. Okay, so time-sensitive, time-constrained material, it is vitally important that for the viability of the cells and that they are delivered on time, on schedule. Any delays in transit and their cells are not likely to be viable. This is also important for meeting any manufacturing schedules or arrival of the patient to hospital as well, to the clinic as well. This also includes timely provision of any preconditioned packaging for apheresis samples, for instance. There is no point a patient coming in to have their samples taken if there's no packaging there for them to be able to be shipped. So it's absolutely vital that the actual provision of packaging is maintained and is there on time. So also as well, with regards to time, the variability in patients coming in to have their apheresis samples taken means that we need to build flexibility in to react to delays. So it may be that on the day or even on the afternoon of collection that we find out that there is a change, there is a delay by maybe 1 or 2 hours. Now this can have a knock-on effect and we need to be able to react to that in good time. Temperature sensitive, it's obviously important that the temperature of the product is maintained throughout and not only maintained but also recorded so that it is able to be proven that the product was at the correct temperature. With packaging provision as well, there needs to be controls to ensure that it is preconditioned properly and also requalified properly between each use to absolutely guarantee to ensure that it's going to perform at the level as it should do to protect these valuable products. Also as well, it's important to consider the design of the packaging, the temperature packaging, to ensure that it will facilitate end use in the clinical environment. Now, highly trained operatives are vital. The very complex nature of these products means that expert oversight and operation is required at every single stage in the process. Now, this is obviously aided by systems, but ultimately it's people that actually complete each of these parts, and it's absolutely vital that they're highly trained. Now, global coverage obviously is key. Providers must be able to provide services across the world, interlinking products, locations, and people through logistics services. And it's very often we will be shipping maybe raw materials or even sell products completely across the world, and that global coverage is essential. Now, risk mitigation, there's a lot that can happen with logistics. It's generally a case of when and not if. So we need to make sure that there are backup options, a variety of routes, and also providers that in real time can be switched to maintain the schedules and ultimately the viability of that product. Regulatory oversight obviously ties all of these together. Now, this covers both customs paperwork and any requirements, but also the quality oversight of the whole logistics process. So this is things like the quality management systems, the SOPs covering handling, packaging, etc., and so on. Really, the key message of this slide is that specialist control or control of the whole logistical process is vital for success. Okay, so for this slide, this really is to highlight the different transport options available for cell and gene therapy logistics. So as we've talked about, really the specialist provider needs to have control of the logistics process to make sure that they can manage and maintain those temperature sensitivities. So for short distances, a road transport is a good option for that. It allows the provider to take control, to have minimize any risks and so on. However, as we've talked about, when shipping internationally or even domestically across longer distances, road isn't an option because it's not going to allow the delivery of product within the required time frame. So we have to use an air option. Now, really, there is only one option that is suitable for the typical transport of these therapies, and that is commercial air cargo flights. So as many of you may be aware, commercial passenger flights actually carry cargo as well, with the obvious exception of budget airlines. Now, and specialist networks utilize these commercial passenger flights across the world to build their logistics solutions, and I really want to go into why that is in this slide. So as we talked about risk mitigation, when you think how many different airlines there are, how many different alternate routes, how many different airports and providers there are, by using commercial passenger flights, this really gives the specialist a large variety of options and ports to really design and provide that risk mitigation. You know, if there is an issue out of one particular port, that can be diverted to another port. If there's a weather incident, for instance, or some kind of other issue, it is quite easy to divert that. Now that moves on to large interconnected networks. So if you think we have access to all, essentially all commercial passenger flights traveling all over the world to all different locations. So it's a much larger network than any individual cargo or integrator network, and really allows you to build that up globally, not just in a preferred area. And also, these are not just going to be hub-to-hub movements. They're going to be to more local, more remote, more centralized airports. So suitable schedules with commercial flights. The schedules typically would run throughout the day, as opposed to a cargo option, which would have limited options and maybe typically run overnight or once every few days. So it allows the specialist to choose, a flight at a time that meets the patient's needs, essentially, that allows you to meet that tight delivery time frame, be that 18 hours, be that 15 hours, or whatever that is. Now, again, that specialist control. So we talked about the control around choosing the routes, but really by using commercial flights, it also allows the specialist to control other parts of that transport. So that's down to things like the actual customs processing, and also obviously the design of the solution by picking and choosing the most reliable routes, the most reliable providers, the most reliable options in that. Now, there's also lots of premium options that are available to use. Now, these are typically pharmaceutical specific, which are obviously used for products like cell and gene therapies, but also there's ultra premium options such as hand carry or even charter options where you have really specialist needs. Now, one of the other key reasons to use the commercial passenger flight network is the accessibility throughout. So as we've discussed, that is often a case of when something happens, not if something will happen. And through using commercial airlines, the specialist is able to recover the product in the event of issues relatively straightforwardly, and then alternate backup solutions can be implemented. If you're using, say, an integrator, there is not that luxury to do that. And there's some good examples of that from the adverse weather we saw in the US earlier in the year, where lots of networks, it was not possible to get packaging and so on out of those networks. So really, the key message from this slide is that the use of commercial passenger flights is essential to cell and gene therapy logistics, and really that's because it gives the specialist the required control to maintain the supply chain. Okay, so really this slide is to demonstrate essentially the big drop-off of availability of options of passenger flights in the start of the pandemic. Now, importantly as well, it's not just the number of flights that have been reduced, it's also the variability of these flights as well. So in the US, in the domestic flight market, there was actually approximately a third of scheduled flights actually didn't fly. So we have a real perfect storm of challenges of trying to move these products. So all of this data, by the way, is from Eurocontrol and also the US Bureau of Transportation Statistics. So the next slide shows the actual EU air traffic percentage change versus pre-pandemic levels up to date, essentially to May 21. As you can see, after that initial drop-off at the start of the pandemic, we have reached a point now where there is more stability. We've settled at a relative place of stability, albeit far reduced. So remember, there's not those options. Traffic between the EU and the US is approximately minus 63% from where we would be expected, and US domestic transport or air freight actually shows a similar stability level. However, the data for that is only to February this year. Now, there is some information that shows that in March, the US domestic flights were increasing up to around about a drop of minus 25%. And I've actually had some anecdotal information from colleagues who have been flying in the last few days in the US, saying that things are starting to look a little bit more normal. Now that hasn't carried through to obviously the variety, the scope of different flights at the moment, and that is just domestic flights in the US. But it does seem to be some hope that things are starting to change in the US. So this next slide really is demonstrating the ongoing impact to air traffic. This is a forecast by Eurocontrol based on different scenarios, so different vaccine scenarios. Now, at time of press, there is actually some slightly updated data for this now. However, essentially the information is the same. It's just a slightly more pronounced S-shaped curve. What these forecasts show is that the return to typical typical flight volumes isn't going to happen until at least 2024-25, and that's the best case scenario really. So we're likely to see disruption. We're likely to see that the problems that we faced over the past year continue for at least the next 2 to 3 years. If you think about it, it sort of makes sense. So restrictions are still in place throughout much of 2021, particularly international restrictions. So it's really unlikely to see a international return to more long-haul options until at least next year. Now, as I say, US domestic data is only until March, but passenger numbers do appear to be up, and there does appear to be a slightly faster recovery there. But at the international lanes, we are really looking at least another 2 to 3 years until they recover. So the key message here is that there's an improving situation, but longer term disruption is likely, and we need to everybody needs to get used to operating within this highly changeable situation. And really the key for recovery is the returning passengers to boost those schedules. So if anyone's still listening, this I thought would be an interesting poll question, really to think when will you start returning to pre-pandemic levels of travel. I think as hopefully as I've demonstrated, the requirements for flights to pick up is essentially passengers. Until we have those multiple options of flights, it makes it very difficult to build in the different risks, to build in the time frames that are required. So I think it's an interesting comment to when would you feel comfortable traveling. So me personally, I think it's probably not going to be till at least next year till I'm actually able to travel. I know that I need to travel for business, particularly as soon as possible. But with the restrictions still in place, it's going to be at least next year, I think. So I don't know if anyone else has had a chance to click on that. Okay, so we've got some figures just in. So 57% next year, and just under a third the year after, and 14% never. So I think that never is quite interesting, with obviously the advent of home working and so on. So thank you for that. So moving on to the next slide. So this is a case study. I wanted to really go over. I think it really highlights the impact of not having those passenger flights available. So this is time and temperature sensitive T-cell transport. It was from the east coast of Canada, so a major city in the east coast of Canada, to a relatively major city on the west coast of the US. So it's quite a straightforward shipment. In normal times, it would have been done on a direct flight. It would have been the time scale would have been met quite easily. However, because there were no direct flight options, we had to really go back to the drawing board, really look at how this was going to be done. And I think this really shows the level of complexity now for specialist providers. So ultimately, what we needed to do was arrange for a road transport from Canada across the border into the US, and then a domestic US flight. Now, that sounds straightforward enough, but there's lots of planning that needed to be done to make sure that this was completed in time. When transiting the border from Canada into the US via road, if the shipment clears after hours and there's no FDA officials there, they're just going to put it straight on FDA hold. And that could be, be devastating to the shipment. It may be many days till that's taken off. So using, or in conjunction with our BioCare customs brokerage arm, the cell and gene team worked with them to actually devise the best crossing for this product, so that it was the most responsive FDA department, so we could make sure that the shipment was cleared and FDA cleared, more importantly, as soon as it had passed the border. Now, everything was going well at this point, and we dropped off, or went to drop to the airport. However, the advertised cargo hours that were advised to us during the setup of this were open till 10 o'clock to accepting cargo till 10 o'clock. But in actual fact, they closed at 6 p.m. due to the COVID restrictions, and no one had updated any of their information. So late-ish at night, the drivers at the airport not able to drop the cargo in. We were able to redirect them to the nearest or the next nearby airport for the next flight out in real time. That shipment flew out overnight and was delivered the following morning on schedule. I think that really demonstrates the length for what would be actually a very straightforward shipment in normal times, and the sort of length that specialist providers have to go to maintain those delivery schedules for such a relatively straightforward shipment. Okay, so moving on to some strategies, logistic strategy to navigate this ongoing period of change. So really, one of the most important thing is worst-case planning and assessment. As I say, if something is going to go wrong, it's likely that it will do. So it's important to be prepared for that. Important to have the backup options planned and ready to go, with also a team in place who's actually monitoring that in real time, providing updates to the customer and ready to react if there is an issue. Now, a good example of this is, for instance, shipping to China, and we've done this for a number of customers, whereby typically we would send out across the Pacific Ocean, whereas we're actually looking at, okay, what do we need to do if we can't go out that direction? How do we have to plan if we have to ship across the Atlantic and over Europe, and building in worst case assessments and planning in that way. And that really is just essentially proving that that supply chain that is going to be successful whatever happens. Also, it's important to regularly review the routings. Now, one of the main issues, not only the reduced flights, but it's the instability of flight schedules. So it may be that previously airlines would update their schedules once or twice a year, summer, winter schedules. However, with the pandemic, flights are liable to be cancelled at the last minute. Schedules are updated weekly, monthly. It is very difficult to plan too far ahead in advance. So it's important that those routings, that work is regularly reviewed. And for some clients, we do that on a per shipment basis. So we'll provide them with the primary routing and multiple backup options on a per shipment basis. Now, when working with Repertoire on ongoing studies of theirs, this is also important as new sites come online for the studies, that communication, that we can start planning that in the live time with the most current data, because routes are so changeable at the moment. Now, greater use of alternate routings is another important area. So, and as we talked, it's with the example, it's important to utilize different roads, different port options. Maybe not the most obvious choice, but it really needs the solution design to be a bit more creative. It may involve a slightly longer drive. It may involve even a dedicated road, or even an onboard courier or charter. And we've had some companies with their own private jets in the past year who are actually looking to use their own jet to actually complete the actual flight with us coordinating everything around that, just to make sure that the product gets there in time. So also consideration of location, timing, and temperature choices is important with this. So if you have a particular product that needs collecting at a certain time, or a patient donating a sample at a certain time, it's important to involve or important to discuss this with your logistics provider before making any specific arrangements. It may be that if that product is donated at maybe even a few hours either side of that, or even an hour either side of that, that allows a different flight, a dedicated direct flight to be used. So it's absolutely vital that considerations around timing and locations, and also temperature choices as well, so for instance fresh versus frozen, are discussed with your logistics provider. Now really the agility of service providers throughout the past year and a half has been vital, certainly for BioCare, and that's the agility to plan, the agility to identify and react, but also the agility to maintain the supply chain. And that's now more important than ever with a more limited supply of many materials. So really the key message here is that people and knowledge are key to navigating this changing landscape. So the key message really for this webinar is that there is likely to be ongoing disruption to the already very complex supply chains in the future, really for the next 2 to 3 years at least. Physical transport and raw material availability are likely to be impacted, and as the world and industries recover and rewire physical connectivity, the agility to plan as well as react in real time, and the agility to customize is vital. But really it's the accessibility of the service that is important, to actual physical contact, being able to pick up the phone and immediately speak to somebody knowledgeable so that you can get on with your core tasks. Really, there's going to be continuing change for the first half of the next decade, and that success through navigating together relies on trusted partners who are there when you need them most. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Chris. So yeah, I guess we're going to move on to the Q&A now. We have a couple of questions that have come in already, but just a reminder to the audience, if you just want to put a question in into the question window at the bottom of your screen, this is your chance to ask something of our presenters. So yeah, first question for you, Christopher. What are you doing internally to guard against ongoing disruption?
Hey, thank you, James. One of the main thing we're really doing is investing in people. Since the start of the pandemic, we'll have more than doubled our workforce by the end of this year. And I think that's amazing when you think about it, considering the restrictions that are in place. It's really people that drive BioCare, people that make the difference, people that allow us to have and build those trusted relationships with our customers, and people that allow us to react in the ways that we do. Outside of that, we're also working with our suppliers, that may be packaging, it may be airlines, with ways that we can guard against any ongoing restrictions in products or schedules. But also as well, and as part of our wider cell and gene therapy strategy, we are investing in new systems, new technologies, and also infrastructure, and of course training across the network as well. So really, I guess the key message here is that there's a lot of investment that BioCare is making at the moment in these three areas of people, systems and technologies, and infrastructure, to make sure that we're ahead of the curve, ahead of that growing curve of cell and gene therapy needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you. And then next one. So we've got, have you seen any impact of the EU restrictions on COVID-19 vaccine/component exports?
So the short answer is yes, but it's minimal restrictions. So some of the vectors that we ship for customers have actually shared tariff codes with some of the COVID-19 vaccine components. So they are technically restricted for export outside of the EU. Now, when they are, when the customs formalities are completed, their tariff code will be shared, so that would flag that. Now, there is no small quantity or de minimis exemptions for these. However, as long as the work being completed on them is not COVID-19 vaccine use related, we can actually work with the clients to produce and obtain statements to allow them to be exported. So allow that supply chain to be maintained. But there is some additional work that needs to be done, but it is relatively straightforward to organise.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, thank you. Just looking, I don't think we've had any. Oh no, we've got a couple of questions that have come in. Okay, so we've got next one. What does the next few years look like for BioCare in terms of expansion and coverage?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. So the next few years for BioCare are very exciting. As I mentioned, we are investing heavily at the moment particularly into our cell and gene therapy service, and really the next few years we'll see our dedicated teams continue to grow. So that'll be continuing to grow not only in the US but also in Europe and across Asia as well. Also as well, our footprint, our infrastructure will be invested in, and we'll be opening new locations, many of them targeted at supporting the cell and gene therapy sector. So they'll be strategically located to allow us to help support customers better in those areas. And also as well, systems and technology is really another important area, as I mentioned previously. And we're looking to really develop and lead in this sector. And there's a lot of work going on at the moment, which I'd like to share with you at some point in the future, so hopefully soon. With what we're doing with that. I know for those in the audience who are familiar with our group shareholder, DPD, I think it's fair to say that they've completely revolutionised the home delivery network through their use of technology, and really that's something we want to replicate in the specialist logistics sector, particularly cell and gene therapies. So there's lots and lots going on at the moment. I think the next few years, BioCare is a very exciting place to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing what you can. And then, last question we've got here says, with digitization of processes increasingly prevalent across the industry, what work are you doing to build connections between client and BioCare tracking systems/software?
So that's another really good question, and that actually comes under our systems and technology investment as well. So we are working with a number of companies at the moment to build APIs to actually link the systems together, so we can automate tracking information, but not only tracking information, automate ordering as well. So there's that whole end-to-end automation that I think is important in the industry, and we'll really see more of in the future.
Mm-hmm. No, great, thank you. And then we've got another one. It says, hello, Chris. Thank you for your presentation. Given the inherent risks associated with commercial travel, which includes passengers, why not rely on formal cargo transportation companies that specialize in the transportation of goods rather than people? And how do you ensure the integrity of your products when delivering to remote communities?
Okay, so I think it probably got a little bit lost in the melee of the connection issue, so apologies for that. But really, cargo transportation routes are not really designed for not typically designed for the transportation of cell and gene therapy type materials, and that's really because there's not the control around them, there's not the variety, there's not the backup options. If something goes wrong, it's generally not going to move until the following day. Schedules are not going to allow the I guess creativity, the urgency of cell and gene therapies. The cargo networks are very good for what they're designed to do, but at the moment they're not designed for this type of product. So when it comes to products delivering to remote communities, so what we would typically do is try and obviously, if we're using a flying shipment into them, we would try and make sure that shipment arrives as close to that community as possible. That then buys you the most time. And then because we have such a large network of locations, we can arrange, for instance, in the US to clear in any location through our BioCare customs brokerage division, and then that final mile could be completed by one of our trained operatives. So it's really about getting the product as close to that community, as close to where it needs to be as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we've just got a couple minutes left, so time for one, maybe two more. Yeah, sorry, just one more question. So, yeah, thanks for your overview. Do you provide supply logistics for preclinical and clinical supplies?
So we do. I've just let me check. I've understood the correct question correctly, but essentially, yes, we do provide some level of kit production. So we will provide preconditioned packages out to clinical sites. Now, these may contain tags, bags, and so on, but typically we don't provide empty vials and things like that in advance. Now, that being said, we could have discussions about that, but it's common for us, and we do in all our shipments essentially provide preconditioned packaging and all of the components that make that up.
Yeah, no, thank you. So yeah, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. Thank you, everyone, for sending your questions in. You will shortly see a brief exit survey pop up on your screen to the audience for you to provide feedback and thoughts on today's webinar. So we'd really appreciate that. And yeah, I'd like to thank today's speakers, Christopher Good and Drew Lamb, for that great presentation and discussion, and to our sponsor BioCare for making this event possible. And with that, on behalf of BioCare and Informa Pharma Intelligence, please have a productive remainder of the day.